Hello and welcome again to Money Tips. This is Charles Kelly bringing you money tips to help you save, earn, invest, accumulate and enjoy more money. I'm the author of the book Yes, Money Can Buy You Happiness, and I also spent around about 25 years in financial services, helping hundreds and thousands of people with their finances. So I saw how people organize their money, which is why I wrote the book, because you can organize yourself to build wealth over time. Obviously, it's not a get rich quick thing, but a lot of people say to you things like, I mean, you may have heard this expression, "Oh, it was all right in your day, it was okay then, but you can't do that now." You know, you could you could build a property fortune in the 80s and 90s and the 2000s, but now it's not possible now because prices have gone up too much. It was easy in your day. That's the expression. It was easier in your day. And I hear this all the time. In fact, it wasn't. That's a false assumption. Things may have seemed easier in the past. Some aspects of it were easier. Maybe there was cheaper prices of property, but interest rates were very high. When I first bought my property, interest rates, I think I paid 16.25%, and lending was very tight. You had to go and almost beg building society managers, "Oh yes, well, we might grant you a mortgage. We'll have a look at it. We'll have a look at your application and we'll let you know." This is the way they were. "Yeah, we'll have a look at it." "Yeah, okay, I'll have a look at it and let you know." They were so arrogant. They were king of the castle, as it were. So yeah, some things were better, some things were not. There were not buy-to-let mortgages until the 2000s. I think they started to come in late 90s, 2000s. Anyway, there was a period when buy-to-let mortgages started to build up, and so they were not always around. It was in the 90s, wasn't it? The mid 90s, when the ALA, the Association of Residential Letting Agency, got together with lenders and said, let's put a buy-to-let scheme in place. Before that, you had to go to commercial lenders, and they would charge very high interest rates, 20% sometimes, to give you a mortgage to buy what they considered was a commercial deal, which was a buy-to-let. So, this idea that, you can't do this anymore. Like, you could look at big companies and say, well, they've had all these years, 100 years to build this big company. You can't do that now, can you? Well, I'm going to show you why that is nonsense. Because today, Tesla, which is a very recent company, how long has it been going? 10 years or whatever? Tesla has now become the second largest car manufacturer in the world by share price, by stock market valuation. They've overtaken Volkswagen. They're now bigger than Volkswagen. They're bigger than General Motors and Honda put together. They're bigger than, let me look, FCA, Nissan, Ford, BMW, and all of those put together. They're bigger than BMW and Daimler Benz put together. So, they're worth 100 billion now, which is bigger than Volkswagen. As I said, if you take Honda and Mercedes-Benz, or Honda and Ford and BMW, put all, they're worth more than these companies. It's unbelievable. And yeah, they only manufacture about 300,000 cars, but these other companies are manufacturing millions of cars. And I do doubt that share price, because I think the company hasn't even made a profit yet. They're losing hundreds of millions, but they're apparently basing it on the future expected earnings and value of that company, and the fact that they've opened this plant in Shanghai now, and everything's going electric. But I'm sure that the Volkswagens, the General Motors, and the Hondas, and all those companies will have to respond with cheaper electric cars. So we shall have to see how that story pans out. But it's interesting that this company wasn't started that long ago. Elon Musk is the guy that started it, who I believe started PayPal and then sold it. And today's share price has more than doubled since last October, when the firm reported a rare quarterly profit. Well, they had a slight profit. So, but up to that point, they've been losing billions. So there you go. Toyota has a stock market value of 230 billion, so they're still much bigger. But it's interesting. So, and you've got to remember also that Toyota and Nissan, the Japanese companies, only really got going really in the 80s as part of the world scene. Up to that point, the market was dominated by General Motors and Ford, wasn't it? They were the companies that were starting. You know, remember Henry Ford, 100 years ago now, starting Fords and the Model T Ford, and these were the companies that dominated the market. So if Toyota said, well, we can't win against the Americans, so what's the point? We might as well just buy their cars. Or if Elon Musk has said, well, you can't start a car company because it's all dominated by all the others, then he wouldn't have done that, would he? Now, I'm not saying you can all go out and start a car company. What I'm illustrating here is that these companies are now valuable, and they've only started in the last few years. And if you look at Elon Musk, he's only become a billionaire in the last 20 years. So, and then you look at the 100 largest companies in the world. Now, the biggest companies used to be companies like General Motors and some of the oil companies and manufacturing companies and GE, General Electric, which I believe is a company that has its roots back with Thomas Edison. Bell, which had its roots back to Alexander Graham Bell, I think. The phone company. The inventor of that modern day phone. So those were the companies that dominated the market in terms of their size. But now it's not true. Now companies that have only really been going since the 80s and maybe 90s are now bigger than those companies and dwarf them by size. And they are tech companies. They're not companies that manufacture that much. I mean, all right, Apple is a manufacturing company, but they're not heavy industry type of companies. They don't have any real physical assets as some of these other companies do. But Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, which is the owner of Google, they're all worth around the $1 trillion mark. That's over nearly $1,000 billion, and nearly in the trillions of dollars, these companies. So, if you look at their size, they probably dominate most of the market, just those four companies. Berkshire Hathaway is Warren Buffett's investment vehicle, so he owns lots of different companies. Facebook worth 500 billion, and then you look down. Then there's some banks, and the only older company I can see there is Johnson and Johnson and Visa. They're the only companies I can see that are traditional companies. Berkshire Hathaway would have investments in things like Coca-Cola and McDonald's, but most of the companies are, and then you've got companies like Alibaba, which are fast coming up. And the only company that there is a company that may be bigger than those, and that will be the Saudi Arabian Aramco, which is really the state-owned oil company of Saudi Arabia that has all this oil in the ground. But other than that, it's tech companies now, and the owners of those tech companies are all billionaires. From Alibaba now is nearly 500 billion. When did that start? By this Jack Ma. Who's heard of Jack Ma? It's only started in the last 20 years. Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett is a billionaire, one of the richest men in the world. The Google guys, they're billionaires. Amazon, Jeff Bezos is supposedly the richest man in the world. And then you've also got Bill Gates, Microsoft, and Apple, of course. So all of these companies have only in terms of the size, the length in terms of the market, when you've got they're up against companies that were around 100 years ago. It's amazing how that they've overtaken. I mean, we mentioned oil companies, ExxonMobil, which is the Exxon, and they merged with Mobil Oil, and I think their roots would go back to probably the Rockefeller fortune, who was one of the richest men that's ever lived in real dollar terms. They're worth 340 billion. So, you've got a company like Apple and Microsoft and Amazon worth 3 times as much as that company that goes back, more than 100 years to the Rockefeller, company. So it is quite amazing. So this idea then that, I'm just getting back to my point, take it back to now, reality. When people say, well, it's all right, you can't do that now. You can't make a lot of money now. You can't start a business now that the conditions are not right. But you can. I mean, what I'm saying is, these guys that started these companies, most of these companies were started, these top tech companies were started by 1 or 2 people, like a partnership or one person, or Apple, 2 people. Was it Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, and then you had Microsoft, started by Bill Gates and the other guy, I can't remember his name. So most of these companies have been started by single or two entrepreneurs, and they obviously got investment. They didn't just start it. I mean, they did start very small, but once they'd started from a garage or a student, room in Harvard or something, they did get a lot of investment capital, and that's where America does score high with these companies, because they're all American, because they seem to have the ability to fund these startup companies big time. They put millions into these companies before they'd ever made a penny. Amazon was losing money for 6-7 years, and as an online bookstore, but they kept investing, didn't they? They kept putting the money in, and now they dominate the market around the world. They're even into TV and this sort of stuff. And you look at companies like Netflix, who are now one of the dominant figures in TV and film production. They're making fabulous films and shows that they'll be featured in the Golden Globe Awards and this sort of thing. That company started off as a video rental company that would send you videos for a week, and then you'd send them back, and they've grown to this size. But it takes investment, and this is where, as I said, the Americans seem to have a capital system where they can attract large amounts of capitals and take a chance on companies that haven't made any money. If you watch the program The Dragon's Den here, you see these entrepreneurs sitting back like this. Well, you haven't made any money, have you? You're not making a profit. I'm not going to give my inheritance to you because, you haven't made a profit yet. Where's your accounts? Oh, you're telling me your company's worth $500,000 when you haven't made any profits? Well, this is where they've got it wrong. They're seeing things in a small, narrow way. If the companies that invested in Apple and Amazon said, well, you haven't made a profit, so you're not worth anything, and then you look at the way that the market is investing in into Elon Musk's company, Tesla, they were losing money and only just started making a small profit recently. They were losing money hand over fist, but they had that investment there. They had the investment there to keep them going because they can see the long-term vision. And I think that's where sometimes the banks here don't really have that. They don't seem to have that long-term vision to back companies, because the very large tech companies are mostly American or foreign-owned. And the one big large tech company we had, which was ARM, and ARM is a company based in Cambridge that was they manufacture things that are in every mobile phone device virtually. They were worth billions, and they've now been sold to a Japanese company, a Japanese tech company. So they're not even in British hands anymore. But there's very few British companies that are coming through in the big way, and that these tech companies have come through in the last few years. And yet there is money here. There's money here for tech startups. We have a load of tech startups in the UK. We have many more tech startups than most other countries. But getting them to the next level, we seem to be lacking in terms of market investment. My son works in a company in San Francisco that was started by a guy not long out of college, and my son was at college at university with him in the London University, and he got 20 million to start a company dealing with advertising on gaming platforms. And you look at him, he just looks like a kid, but he got that money in San Francisco, and now the company's been sold for I don't know how much, millions and millions. It's been taken over by Blackstone, the big hedge fund. So it was obviously a multi-million dollar deal. But I can't imagine that guy going to Dragon's Den and then saying, look, I've got this idea for a platform to sell advertising on gaming platforms. They'd be going, what are you talking about? And they just wouldn't. You think they were going to give him money to set this company up? No way. It just wouldn't happen. He was studying in the UK and in the University College London, where he did his masters with my son, and he then set up his tech company in San Francisco because he knows that's where the money is, that's where the big tech startups are, and that's why America is now benefiting from that company, and that the the profits and the earnings from that company and the taxes it generates and the employment it generates. And that company has got offices all over the world. So that's my message to you today. It's never too late to start a business, or start investing or buying properties or whatever it is you want to do. Ray Kroc didn't start McDonald's, or he didn't start the franchise side of it. He didn't start McDonald's. He took it over and franchised it out, the idea. But I believe he was in his 50s when he did that. Colonel Sanders, the original Colonel Sanders guy, was 65. That's that's an old story. That he had this idea for this chicken, and he went around to 1,000 different people to ask for financing for it, and eventually sold that company on for millions. So he was already retired and broke at 65 when he started that company. So never think it's too late to get started. And certainly in property, yes, you could say, well, property's gone up in the last few years. It's not going to go up anymore. It's going to go back to zero, isn't it? No, I don't think so. Property's been going up for 1,000 years, and it's not going to go back to zero. So there'll always be a need for property. And if you want to get into property, don't think, it can't be done now because that was all in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, so it's too late now, it can't be done. That's nonsense. I know people who've started in property, just in the last 2 or 3 years, and they've already built up, a portfolio of over £1 million. And they've actually jumped far ahead of people that have been doing it for years, but not really taking it seriously and not doing it properly. And they did that because they had the training. They did that because they went on courses. They learned from experts. They stood on the shoulders of giants where they could see far ahead. And, they learned things from people that had done it before. And that saved them 10, 20 years of trial and error and trying to do it themselves. So if you want to get into something like this, if you want to learn how to invest in property, just drop me a line, charles@charleskelly.net. Or if you're listening on the Facebook, just Facebook messenger me, and I'll tell you how you can get onto these courses. Some of them are free. You can do a free taster day to learn how to get started in property and how to invest using none of your own money. And incidentally, none of your own money sounds, you can't do that, can you? No, you can't. You need money to make money. Well, no, you don't. Do you think that the people that started Apple and Microsoft and Amazon, they didn't use all of their own money? They were just young guys. They had massive investment from other people's money, and the Google guys, they had massive amounts of investments, and Facebook. If you watch the Facebook movie, you'll see that they had a lot of money from backers. Alphabet, Alibaba was the same. He got backers very early. Jack Ma knew how to use other people's money from a very young age, and he got people to invest in the company very early on. So don't think that you can't do the same on a smaller scale in property. They had investment bankers and hedge funds and these sort of things, but lots of people start businesses using angel investors, joint ventures, partners, people just backing them. So there are lots of methods in property to make money from property using none of your own money, or using other people's money, or investing in property and refinancing it out to move on to the next one. So check out if you want to do this, if you think you've got it in you to do this, because believe me, if you're relying on things like state pensions, I'd forget it. The state pension is going to be pushed back and back, and eventually by the time you retire in 20 years' time, you probably need to wait till 80 to get it. Well, I'm exaggerating a bit, but the state pension in America and the UK, there's no fund there. You've got to remember, there is no fund there. I saw a speech by Ronald Reagan today where he was saying in 1964 that it's all a bit of a scam because there's no social security fund there. And the people that started it just said, well, that's all right, because long we can just keep taxing people to pay it. Well, they're going to run out of people to tax if there's more and more elderly and retired people, and they outnumber the working people by 4 to 1. How's that going to work? That there's not going to be enough people there to pay the taxes. So what I'm saying to you is that you need to row your own boat and do something yourself. Now, yes, you can fund pension schemes yourself. You can fund a scheme. You can put as much money as you can into that. But that's not easy. And the returns in some of these funds are not very good. It's not easy when you're, either trying to buy your house, or you've got young kids, or you've got family. it's not until you're a bit older that you have the money to put into these schemes when maybe the kids are off your hand, and by then you haven't got the time to build up the sufficient funds in the pension scheme. So you may have to think about investing in some way, and property is one of those ways you can do it, because you can get leverage, you can get other people's money, and then you can still enjoy a percentage of the profits. So think about that, and just remember that this is the day when Tesla overtook Volkswagen to become the second largest car making company in the world by market capitalization. They're only second behind Toyota, and they're way ahead of the old Fords and General Motors and all these sort of things. Yeah, you might think the valuation is unrealistic, but the market gets things wrong sometimes, but often they don't get things wrong. People thought the market was crazy when they valued Amazon so highly, but look at the money it's making now. Look at the money Apple and Facebook are making. So the market gets some things wrong, but not always. And clearly there's some very smart money going into Tesla at the moment. So thanks for listening. This is Charles Kelly bringing you money tips to help you save, earn, invest, accumulate and enjoy more money. Drop me a line on Facebook Messenger or charles@charleskelly.net if you're interested in getting into property and learning how you can invest in property using none of your own money. Thanks very much, and bye for now.